Hey, everybody, welcome back to America's Mom. I am your host, Sharona Bishop. And sorry, we did not have a show Monday and Wednesday this week. We were traveling. We were in Washington, D.C., getting the full scoop on everything that's going on. Got to attend the incredible MAHA event there and the rollout of really important information. Bobby Kennedy is keeping his word. And more than that, pushing back on Big Pharma in such a smart way that we're going to be doing Fridays actually with survivors, some survivors rather, and parents of children who succumb to SSRI, unaliving complex. Basically, there are so many side effects of these SSRIs. And essentially, what Bobby Kennedy and the MAHA organization rolled out for us this past week was the reality that Big Pharma, and many of you already know this, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know already, but a lot of you may not understand just how pushy and how really incredulously unbelievable the way they push the SSRIs, whether it's Prozac or Adderall or whatever the next thing is, whatever they're doing, Zoloft, whatever they're pushing onto these children as well as pregnant women, and of course adults, and not to mention our veterans. It is without any thought to how the patient is going to get off of those SSRIs. The idea for so many decades now has been just take this pill, take this shot. It will make you well. It will make you skinny. You will be happy. Everything's going to go great. But they never give us full and total disclosure. And that is the side effects of what it is they're handing off to us. But more than that, in my opinion, I want to know how much they get paid every single time they give a pill like that. So I told this story because I couldn't believe that it was part of protocol. I literally reached out to Bobby Kennedy to tell him exactly what happened to my own daughter when she was very pregnant, like maybe four months pregnant. She goes in to have her checkup, and they give a mental health evaluation because everything's about mental health, right? Everything's about mental health, not because they care about your mental health, but because they're going to put you on something. They are going to make you a client for life from the moment you say you feel a little bit sad. If you've ever been 4 months pregnant, you feel fat, you feel tired, exhausted, depressed because nothing fits you, but you don't really look pregnant yet. It is not, 4 months is not fun. Okay. It's not a fun place to be. And so, of course, my daughter was feeling a little bit down. She takes this little test and they're like, oh, you're depressed. And immediately they wanted to put a 4-month pregnant woman on Prozac. I was shocked. I was so upset. I called the hospital. I called the women's health clinic that my daughter had gotten care through because I had been told this was more of a holistic women's care facility. So I called the actual doctor in charge and said, I want you to know that this is what happened with my daughter. I am so disappointed. I'm so disgusted because all you have to do is read the label that says, please consult your doctor if you are pregnant. You know why? Because it's devastating for the baby and it's devastating for the mother. The impact that SSRIs are having. At one point, Bobby Kennedy was speaking towards the end of the event. It's a very intimate event in a small room at the Willard. And at the very end, he said, I am not kidding you guys. This is what he said. He said, I've had to detox from cocaine like more than 100 times. I don't know how many people caught that in the room. I caught it. I kind of chuckled, but the subject matter was so serious. But he said watching someone go through detoxification of SSRI is brutal because essentially it takes 90 days. Listen to this. I want you to listen to me before you fall prey to your teacher or coach or doctor or nurse or whatever, your medical friend or whatever, telling you need to put your child on one of these medications to quote calm them down and get them to be able to learn better. I love that one. Your child will learn better because they'll be able to sit still longer. Before you do that, I want you to understand something. It takes 90 days for this, whatever form of SSRI you're using, to get out of your system. After that is when the withdrawal begins. And many people do not do well on the withdrawal process. A lot of people go through suicidal ideology. A lot of people end up losing everything, their families. They switch to other drugs in order to get through it. And by then, they've had such an identity crisis. It changes who you are. And a lot of people have said that. Some people will say they feel much better. They feel like a totally different person. Well, that's largely what I heard at this conference of people who had been prescribed SSRIs and they felt like a totally different person. There are so many unbelievable stories. So we're going to be giving our Fridays to the stories of parents and survivors of SSRIs. And the fallout is unbelievable. I bet you are not aware of one of the worst side effects possible from taking these SSRIs, which is complete and total sexual benignness. Like nothing, like completely and totally not just asexual, but losing all feeling in your in your body in those areas. I had no idea that was a consequence of taking these medications. And guess what? Your doctor is not telling you that either. I spoke with three young girls, young, beautiful. They, two are attending Vanderbilt University, very smart, very educated. They had no idea this was going to be a side effect. They were just experiencing some nervousness prior to test taking. And the doctor said, let me give you something for that. And it has cost them dearly. So, we're going to be talking a lot about that. Today is Military Spouse Appreciation Day. And of course, our veterans were talked a lot about at the MAHA event because they're twice as likely as the regular US civilian to unalive themselves. They are immediately put on antidepressants and medication when they talk about feelings of despair or being upset or trying to transition back into civilian life. And those concerns are not, they're not dealt with correctly. You cannot just take a pill so that you can help you deal with your situation. There was so much conversation about that. So what I want everybody to know is that under Bobby Kennedy and Health and Human Services, there is now going to be expedited funding to teach pharmaceutical reps and doctors how to get our people off of these SSRIs, what the actual transition detoxing looks like, because it is a process and it was a process created by those who were using. They came up with the protocol because they wanted to get off of it and the doctors had no answers for them. So this is coming from real patients who have experienced it firsthand and helped many others to get off. Well, our doctors will be incentivized to more. They will be paid more to get their patients off of SSRIs than to put them on. And I, for one, am cheering very loudly on that one. Also, alternative methods outside of traditional pharmaceuticals is going to be, again, fast tracked and expedited to help serve the people in this country sincerely far much better. I'm so excited and so grateful. So that was the week. That was a lot of what I spent my time doing, getting a ton of information and hearing about everything that was going on. It is just so great. So obviously, you guys probably saw over the weekend the hantavirus is back, right? The hantavirus. Well, I have something to say to those who might try to push the hantavirus. I come from Colorado, where everybody knows about the hantavirus. It's been around forever. We really don't think much about it, but clearly the CDC. I don't know who at the CDC, but I better not see it happen because again, that's under Bobby Kennedy. I cannot imagine it would happen, but places like Colorado is where I can imagine some strict enforcements happening because Colorado submitted themselves to the World Health Organization independent of the federal government. So the federal government is out of the WHO. We are no longer, as a country, being guided by the World Health Organization because they believe children are sexual when they are babies. Okay, so that's gross. And we don't need their guidance if they can't even get that right. Okay, children are not sexual. But it very clearly states at 5 years old, they should be receiving sexual information. I'm not kidding you. They should be receiving sexual education at 5 years old. That is what the WHO believes. So we're not a part of that on a federal level, but places like Colorado, first to my knowledge, by the way, have submitted themselves and joined the World Health Organization. And I can see a place like that all of a sudden implementing another lockdown. Well, I thought it only fair to warn the powers that be, our representatives across this country who might be thinking about this strategy, okay? We have the First Amendment. right? The ability to say whatever we want to say, our speech is protected. That is so sad for a lot of officials out there. They're very upset about that. As you can see, there is most definitely an attack on the First Amendment in this country. I do not like it. I do not like it. I've talked about this a lot. Always, I've mentioned this. When I was a little girl, I went to a Southern Baptist church. Pastor Paul Jones was our pastor, and at the time, it was the beginning uprise in Grand Junction in Colorado of just the lesbian gay movement. I guess it's the milk, spreading from Harvey Milk out in California over to Colorado. And a lot of people were saying we just need to shut them down. We don't need to hear from them. Maybe that would have been wiser at the time. I don't know. Nonetheless, my pastor said, "Hey, actually, we don't want to do that. We don't want to silence anybody's opinion because as sure as we silence theirs, they will come for ours, the Christian." Right. So I think we were too generous to those who tried to destroy our children and destroy our country. But nonetheless, I grew up with that founding principle, and I believe that founding principle. You protect people's right to speak and say what they want to say. The Second Amendment obviously protects the First, and that is a reality. So I wanted to share this with the government. If anybody is getting some ideas about how they're going to, once again, lock down the American people, pitch a vaccine under emergency use orders, and potentially do some serious damage to our country, once again, using a fear campaign model, which, guys, I just want to remind you that the CDC and the Department of CDC for each state and the association at large for the country said that the quickest way to get compliance from all of us in this country was fear. They stated it on their website. Fear is the tool they were going to use. And boy, they did a great job, right? Showing us videos of people dying everywhere in China, all this stuff. So here is the fear campaign I would like to run against government. 2019, we had a lot of guns in this country, but I want you to know since 2019, there are 84.7 million more guns out on the streets to law abiding citizens. Those are just the ones we know about, according to the FBI. So, where you've had to purchase and you have reported the purchase, 84.7 million. And then this year alone, in addition to that, another 4 million guns have already been purchased in 2026. And before you think they're all just handguns, which no problem there, about a third are long gun variations. So, I would think long and hard, government, because this is a people right now that is not going to abide government as their savior again. We will not fall into that trap in my lifetime again. So I would encourage government to sit down, back off. The testing is over. You failed. We win, and we will win again. So I encourage government, you know, don't try it. You've been warned. Don't try it. Moving right along, I think probably one of the most disturbing things that I've seen and I've read recently is it really plays into why the hantavirus scare is not going to work. It's not going to happen. Is because people are so awake now. They're remembering a founding principle that government is a necessary evil. Reagan said it best, 8 scariest words you can ever hear. Hello, I'm from the government and I am here to help. Very scary words because government is never acting in its own interest or in your interest rather. It's acting in its own interest because it's full of individual humans who are vying for what they want and how they can help themselves in the system. Not everybody is that way, but not enough aren't. Okay, not enough aren't. So I want to point to what happened in December of 2026. Many of you may not have seen it. I want to make sure you did see it. I think we have an image for this one too, and that is the automatic draft registry. This was already effective, I believe, in 46 states across the country. This is taken directly from the .gov site. I went on, I read it for myself to make sure I wasn't being tricked, because you need to go read this stuff for yourself. I want you to know how disturbing this whole thing is. Supposedly it was bipartisan. I have no trouble believing that because I don't think the majority of people in Congress have ever read the Constitution. I don't think they understand or have children and are thinking about the future of their sons. I don't think they understand about our natural rights and liberties. And so I have no problem believing this was probably a bipartisan bill of some kind. I'm going to go through and see if there was anybody who dissented, probably Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I don't know who else from there. So we're going to find out. But this automatic draft registry, 46 states in the union already had it, okay, where you were automatically signed up through your DMV. The DMV would give you your driver's license, and then they would automatically register you for the draft. Well, you'll remember just a couple months ago, maybe a month ago, getting closer to 2 months ago, President Trump was asked about whether or not he would be utilizing the draft for the Iran war. Now, there's so much I want to say about this. I don't feel totally prepared. We are going to have our expert on talking about Iran and what's happening with China and Russia and the implications of the Greater Israel Project over there. And I think that we are failing to see what the bigger picture is here. If President Trump said he was not willing to take the draft off the table, that's important to note. I know for a fact, I was sitting in a conversation this week, and their child, he's not young, he's my age, was being called back up to active duty in Iran, boots on the ground. And it was urgent and it was immediate. And that happened this week on Tuesday. So I know for a fact that we're moving moving our men into Iran on the ground. I know that for a fact. Now, the data on this, I think, is really interesting. I want to read this to you. And this was all pulled from an article that CNN put out. And I want you to keep in mind this is from CNN and still hear the way that they're talking about this draft, the fact that they are quick to insert that it has nothing to do with Iran when the verbiage was initially added. But the verbiage was never taken out either, which is interesting when it was signed into law in December by President Trump. So here we go. Young eligible men will be automatically registered for the military draft pool starting in December as part of a measure tucked into the annual defense policy bill that Congress signed into law late last year and President Trump signed in December. Men ages 18 to 26 must already register for selective service in case a draft is required. The last time we had a draft, of course, was February of 1973 during the Vietnam War. According to the National Defense Authorization Act, which President Trump signed, the automatic registration will apply to male U.S. citizens. Listen to this, you guys. If you're here, now listen, if you're here on a visa or you're here illegally, this might be a good reason to get out of Dodge, okay? I'm not saying, I don't know, who knows, but listen to this verbiage. Male U.S. citizens and every other male person in the country between the ages of 18 and 26, the mandatory registration applies to green card holders, refugees, asylum seekers, and undocumented men. Those on a non-immigration visa are exempt, but currently in states that haven't enacted automatic registration, men must register within 30 days of their 18th birthday. The agency accepts late registrations up until a man's 26th birthday. Did you all hear that? There's your loophole. They will accept late registration up until a man's 26th birthday. But don't you worry, they did this for us, okay? They did this to make your life easy by enacting this automatic enrollment. I want you to know how they did it. According to the 2023 report, over 60% of registration comes from the state motor vehicle department. And Democratic representative who brought this bill forward, by the way, Chrissy Callahan, who sponsored it, she told CNN in a statement, making registration, I want you to remember how helpful government is. Please remember this. Making registration automatic not only saves taxpayers dollars by eliminating the need to advertise, but finally ensures that young men are not unknowingly penalized. In the statement, Holohan stressed that the measure has bipartisan support. And what is the penalty, by the way, if you do not register? It could be up to 5 years and I think like $60,000 fine, something like that. But here's the thing, like I was saying earlier, is we're in a new day right now. We're in a time where we have just experienced the greatest manifestation of distrust of our federal government ever, ever. We don't trust them. We don't believe them. We are not looking to them. We are increasingly looking within our local communities and to independent media. And we're really trying to sort out and figure out what's going on. Okay. And in that pursuit, we are realizing that there are a lot of people who are making decisions again because it is in their best interest, not America at large. And that is not to say that there's not a time for fighting or whatever. I get it. Got it. Got it. But in this particular case, I find the timing really interesting. I spent some time, I'm going to give you guys some homework because I think it's really, really important. I am a big absorber of Diary of a CEO. Yes, Stephen is a little bit lefty. We totally know. We get that already, but he's an excellent interviewer. And he's not afraid to have people on that he obviously, I think, clearly agrees with, and of course, those he does not, and everything in between. And this last week, he had Professor Zhang on his podcast. This guy is not on social media. He's not famous. You, unless if you knew who he was, you won't know who he is. And he gave some really unbelievable predictions in 24 that came to pass, and has now issued 4 more predictions for the future that were very, very fascinating. I'm not going to get into them here, but I'm going to put up on my social media the link to Stephen's interview, a Diary of a CEO interview with Professor Zhang. Of course, he takes jabs at POTUS, eat the meat, spit out the bones, because how could you not? You know, everybody's got a signal. It's like being in Europe when they're like, oh, we want to be, make Europe great again, but oh, can you get Trump to stop talking so ugly? You know what I mean? Like it's everybody. If you're European, like I really just largely don't listen to you too much, because it's a very different experience being an American living free, and knowing that you have independent thought, you have a constitution that governs your government, that puts your government back in place so long as we hold them accountable. We really have the ability to right our ship, and that's the only thing I would disagree with in the interview, that if you get a chance to listen to, I do not believe that America is in the decline in the way they stated. I do not believe America is going to fall. I do not believe that. The power of the individual is too great an influence in this country. We don't need the masses to make massive change. So I will disagree on that. And anyone who is saying that, which I heard a lot of that kind of, kind of crazy, disparaging stuff this week. And I just thought, I just don't believe it. 2 practices. I want to share this with you guys too before we bring our first guest on here in a few minutes. 2 practices that I have begun implementing in my life, and I strongly encourage you guys to do. I've been obviously reading books forever. Please read books. Please expand your brain. Do not trust 60-second reels, please, because the framing is so obvious. You have no idea if anything they put in that reel is true. None. And we're having these conversations with our boys right now. Like, how do you know that that's true? What was your verified source? I mean, they obviously have a bent. So I don't even watch reels hardly at all anymore, unless if it's like a sports reel, then I watch it. But I don't watch them anymore hardly at all, because I'm just like, it's so obvious that this is taking you into a different direction than the direction of truth, than real truth. And then secondly is listening to the Bible in the mornings. I can't necessarily read first thing in the morning because my eyes are blurry a little bit. And maybe if you're over 40, yours are too. So I really highly recommend just turn the Bible, go to YouTube, turn on the Bible, don't even care which chapter, just go and turn it on, because there's a couple of things with this. One is the need ultimately as a country to raise our frequency. We have been traumatized by our government under the Biden administration, under this COVID, globalist attack, and of course the stealing of our elections. That is the real attempt to destroy America, is to dissolve our elections, to give us the illusion of choice, all the while knowing they have selected already who they want to rein in and to bring in their agenda, which is not in the best interest of you and I. So they've done that. They spent the last 5 years doing that to us. But I, again, think the gun sales are very indicative of the great American spirit alive and well across this country, because this is a massive increase, you guys, massive increase in gun purchases compared to previous 5 and 10 year increments. It's massive. And I think it's very demonstrable of our great American spirit. Our founders knew what they were doing. And when God gave us self determination, he knew what he was doing. So, listening to the Bible, reading books, it puts the power and responsibility back on you, the individual, to do everything you can to fulfill the mandate God has for you. You can't leave it in the hands of everybody else and say, oh, if only Trump this, then I wouldn't that. It's bull. It's a victim mentality. You don't have to live there. You should never stay there. And let's get on with it, and let's save our country every single way that we know how. And where we don't know, God is filling in the gaps. Before I bring our guest in, I wanted to bring your attention to one more thing that I think is really, really important, especially for parents across the country to understand about this system that has been incentivizing bad people to have access to our children to destroy the human spirit. And we've talked a lot about public education, but I want to show you some numbers. I want to show you some stats because I know we're all motivated to do the right thing for our future, for our families, for our legacy. And I want to show you this. Okay. So I got on the Gov site again and I was like, I want to see what is happening with our country and what's going on with our children. And I think, do we have that first image? Let's pull that up. So this is the actual data from the FBI Crime Data Explorer on the attacks on children, okay, on what is actually happening with sexual assaults on children. Because I always want to see who's just like bloviating when we say that your children are being sexually assaulted in higher numbers at your school than your church, than your grocery store, than your parking garage, all these things, okay? And I was like, I really want to see firsthand. I want you to zoom in just a little bit, if you can, Michael, on that second line. The majority of sexual assaults on children are happening in residences and home, with an overwhelming 290,000 reports, 311 reports happening in residences and homes. Okay. That is very significant. But I wanted to focus in on what's going on with our schools. And actually, if you go back one for just a second, I want to zero in on that first one because this is the elementary and secondary school. So this is going to be your kindergartners through eighth grade. 34,470 reports alone last year. Last year of sexual assaults on children. School and elementary, secondary schools, 34,470. That is more than unknown. And we never know sometimes how people are categorizing these assaults. We don't know. For example, hotels were 8,000, drugstores, 12,000, highways, roads, the back alley, they make it so scary. Don't walk down the alley by yourself. You're far more likely, you're over twice as likely almost to be assaulted as a child in your public school than you are in a back street alley. Let's go to the next one because for whatever reason, they have a secondary category in addition to school and elementary that just said school. And this is, there will be one more that says school, college, and university. So that's another 4,539. I think this is our older kids, our high school, college, and university. These are what is reported. So that's 4,539. That's taking us up to over 40,000 children last year. And then you'll see down below, they have another category, school/college. Now, again, I don't know why they made the distinction. I'm not sure, but it's an additional 3,611 children. They also do not take the time to break it down into, when they're saying air, bus, train, terminals, all that, they don't delineate whether or not that was a school bus situation. They don't break it down that far. You'd have to go into each state, into each county. But I just want to point out, you're looking at well over 43,000 assaults on children every year in the public schools. And I believe, did that show the churches? I just want to check real quick. Did that show the churches in that first one? I think the first one showed the contrast with your churches, your synagogues, and that. Can we put that first one up one more time? Because I think it was on there. I want you guys to see versus the reports of sexual assaults on children in your oh, bummer. I think I barely cut it off. That's too bad. I think it's about 12,000 reports of sexual assaults on children and this included mosques, synagogues, and Christian churches across the country. 12,000 versus the 40, a little over 44,000 reports that we receive every year of children being sexually assaulted in the public school system. What's so great about this website, by the way, you guys, FBI crime website, is that you can laser in on your state and laser in on your county to find out exactly what's going on locally. Please do it. Go check it out. Keep your kids safe, protect them. It is time that the teachers union stop protecting pedophiles and start being honest. Because I have a feeling those numbers are a lot higher than that because the teachers unions work overtime. A lot of times you don't get fired for having sexual assaults. I am aware of 10 sexual assaults myself from Garfield County schools where my children used to be in Colorado that were never reported, only reported within the school. They were never reported to the police. 10. So if there's that many, for maybe 2 being reported to the police because they finally had to. There was so much public outrage. I can't even imagine how much higher those numbers are. Please protect your children. we're getting what they say that we get what we want. They say that we get what we're voting for, but I really don't think so. And I want to share this video with you. And then Patrick Kolbeck from Election Crime Bureau, Mike Lindell's organization that Patrick has been running for the last 4 years, doing a phenomenal job exposing the criminal strategies of stealing our elections, literally working on election days, election nights to report ongoing reports of crime happening in real time in our elections, is going to be joining us in just a few moments. But I want to remind you, I want to take just a couple minutes to remind you how we got here. We are not crazy in 2020 to have been skeptical of the electronic voting machines. Oh, no, 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 no. That alarm was sounding a long time before that. Take a listen.
Ought to mean a very high rate of reliability. Listen to computer whiz Howard J. Strauss of Princeton. If somebody set out to alter the outcome of an election, it's not only possible, but it's rather easy.
This system has virtually no protection. It's not a house with doors without locks. It's a house without doors.
Could you put the fix in a national election? Realistically, could it be done?
Yeah, get me employed by the company that writes this program. In that case, you only need bribe one person. One person writing the software. You'd have access to a third of the votes in the country. Is that enough to throw the election?
In 1988, Ronnie Duggar reported in the New Yorker. Willis Ware, a RAND Corporation computer specialist, warned there is probably a Chernobyl or a 3 Mile Island waiting to happen in some election. Computers can be ordered to transfer votes from one candidate to another, to add votes to a candidate's total, and determine an outcome in accordance with a specified percentage spread. All the computer experts I have spoken with agreed, no computer program can be made completely secure against fraud, and regard the theft of the presidency by computer as entirely possible.
Most people thought Chad was the name of a person, not the name of a clingy rectangle that refuses to let go of a punch card ballot. Soon those punch card ballot machines will sit forever silent, because in 2 years, federal funding will push this out of the ballot box.
Because of the problem paper caused, the Help America Vote Act was signed into law, providing shiny modern computers to voters across the country.
Improve accessibility and technology of voting places, $3 billion.
Many U.S. states decided to abandon paper systems and instead use touchscreen computer voting machines.
Finally, the digital age of voting where nothing could go wrong.
Election workers are scrambling all over the country trying to deal with an avalanche of last-minute problems with e-voting machines. With this information just pouring in, it's difficult to understand how the electorate can feel any sense of confidence in our upcoming election.
I would just like to know what you can say to reassure us that this election will not be rigged or stolen.
Well, I tell you what, it helps in Ohio that we got Democrats in charge of the machines.
With all this, John, it seems clear that we are replacing a relatively simple system. You check a box or hit a lever with a new, very complicated one that hasn't been tested, leaves no physical record even to check afterwards.
Yes, that's right.
We were there specifically to attend something called the Voting Village, which is something that's gone on for 3 years. And in this, its third year, they had assembled some of the most common voting machines in the country.
Every voting machine in this room is in use in next elections. We are actually asking your help because we don't know much about those devices. They are bought from eBay and they do have the previous election in.
What was so interesting was I assumed coming into it that the big manufacturers, companies like ES&S and Dominion, had provided these machines to the hackers to, field test them. But no, it turns out there's an extremely hostile relationship there, and that ES&S and Dominion and other companies have basically said we don't want to participate, and really have been quite aggressive in saying we don't want to be part of this.
Have any of you reached out to DEF CON to participate?
We have not provided our equipment to them for testing.
Okay. If it's not DEF CON, we're committed to that.
We have actually submitted our systems through the DHS's penetration testing process.
But not DEF CON?
Not DEF CON.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for President Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I worked for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that. And this is what I produced, basically. It looks like that.
Doesn't even matter what you did on the screen besides. You could have voted for the other guy while you were doing this, and it will go back and it will change the logs and it will fix the vote so that one side wins 51-49.
And would that program that you designed be something that elections officials could detect?
They'd never see it.
The courts will not let you look at the source code. They say it's proprietary. Well, there are a lot of proprietary things, and you just have the lawyers sign an agreement that they're not going to expose it, and you're done. But no, you can't even look at it.
The touchscreen machines, those are obviously the most controversial. They leave no paper ballot. How do those work?
Well, it's quite simple. First, the voter touches the name of his or her preferred candidate in any given race. Heat pressure differentials in the touchscreen unit then transmit a digital representation of the voter's choice here to the computer where things happen.
And when you say things, what kind of things?
Oh, nobody knows. These machines are built by private companies which count our votes using secret proprietary software. We don't have a right to know what goes on inside those.
That's right. We don't have a right to know anything about anything. Dadgummy for asking. Patrick Colbeck joins us from Election Crime Bureau. I mean, anything changed since any of that information was made public?
I think what's changed is a lot more people are truly aware of all the vulnerabilities in our system, whereas before they might joke about it a little bit, but they wouldn't really peek behind the covers, if you will, and kind of get behind that curtain of secrecy. They hit, and I mean, in a comedic way, but they hit on the core issue that's at stake. And particularly when we're talking about machines, the core issue is transparency. If you are of the belief that like elections like the 2020 election was the most secure election in American history, then you'd think you'd be bragging about it and showing everybody exactly how well executed it was. And what we've seen in the wake of 2020, 2022, 2024, all the elections, frankly, is an attempt to hide information. And then what's worse is that if you actually want to go in and understand how that election was conducted, the people who are investigating are the ones that are getting prosecuted. Case in point, Tina Peters.
It's completely true. That's what's kind of mind-blowing for everyone. We believe the elections belong to us, but the election platforms are not secure. And yeah, there's the criminalizing of the individual who decides to pursue that. I mean, I could go down the list. John Eastman, Sidney Powell, OAN, Fox News. Gosh, I even think back to, of course, Mike Lindell, yourself, Tina Peters, Jim Hoft, Joe Hoft, Gateway Pundit. The list really just goes on and on. Patrick Byrne. It just keeps going on. Anybody who was effective or had a platform. So I want to get into the actual security of the election platforms, where they stand right now. We have very critical races coming up. There's been a few things that have been brought to my attention that give me a little bit of hope in spite of the machines. And that has to do with the whole platform of elections. So it's not just the machines, but you have local precinct voting. That is a huge component. And this idea of really being able to secure and clean up voter rolls. I want to start with the voter rolls first. Please explain to everybody how that actually works. And is it possible? I remain hopeful. So I hope you don't diminish that, but you might. I remain hopeful that we can, in fact, clean up our voter rolls. Is that a real thing?
It is a real thing, but the problem is they can dirty it within a matter of seconds. And that's what has happened in states like my own state of Michigan, where you can go off and spend a lot of effort cleaning up the voter rolls. The problem is right before the election comes in, which is what happened in 2020, they'll just go off and pollute it with a bunch of illegal voters. And so you really need to monitor what I call the transaction log, if you will, into those voter rolls. You need to have that publicly displayed, which goes back to that key point of transparency, right? You need to know who's making changes to it, what changes are they making, when are they making those changes, so that people can respond in an effective manner for challenges to any illegal votes that may be cast. And of course, that's not what's happening. So I gotta say, I don't know if anything's changed in the security of our election systems since 2020. We still have the machines. We still don't have access to most of the voter rolls, particularly in the battleground states, which is where they're fighting all the DOJ lawsuits to get access to it. But the voter roll is only part of the equation. Just to give kind of everybody a elections 101, if you will, and the key term, and this was impressed upon me early on, well before 2020 elections, back in the 2016 and even 2012 timeframe. When I listened to what Catherine Engelbrecht had to say, she talked about the term chain of custody. And I have done a lot of analysis on it. I served on the Michigan Senate Elections and Government Reform Committee. I mapped out all of our election processes, and I could get real complicated in it, but I really want to boil it down to 4 key concepts for our listeners because it deals with some of the headlines of the day. Number one, the concept of a chain of custody, everybody understands it from watching murder mysteries and trial dramas on TV and everything. If you don't have chain of custody with the evidence you're providing, you don't have a case. And in the case of elections, if you don't have a chain of custody for the election records, then you don't have an election and you should be hitting the reset button. And what I've tried to do is simplify a chain of custody into 4 key sets of records. Number one, the voter rolls, which we're talking about. That's what Department of Justice is filing to get access to in states like Michigan, for example. And then the voter roll determines all the people that are eligible to cast a vote in a given election. Well, the next stage of the chain of custody are the poll books and the voter history data. That's what's captured in these poll books. These poll books are essentially precinct-specific extracts of that voter roll, and they determine not only who's eligible to get the ballot, who to cast, but they actually determine who actually did receive a ballot. So this is the next transition from eligibility to actually getting a ballot. This is a very important set of records, and it's in the poll books. And if you come from a state like Michigan, once again, where they destroy these poll book records within 7 days of the election, you get to understand how important these records really are in the integrity of our elections. And then, of course,
And Patrick, really quick on the
Yeah.
on the poll books, I recall when I very first started voting, they had like paper books that you would sign into
Yes.
when you got there, but we're not using paper books anymore, are we? Everything is online.
Yep, everything's online. It's even getting worse than that, and that it's not local poll books anymore that are electronic. It's actually they're logging in via the internet to state voter registration databases. So it's unfortunately it's getting even worse. Anyway, but we're
Come on,
getting
we
more
need some
schooled
good news,
and
Patrick.
educated, more aware. All right, so that's the good part about all this, and we've got some friends in DC finally that hopefully are tapping into exactly what's happening because we've educated them on what we've observed. So there's hope. So just quick chain of custody conclusion here. So we've got the first 2, voter roll, then voter history via the poll books. The next, of course, is the ballots. And some people want you to think that the only thing of concern is the ballots in an election, and that's complete balderdash. Nope, you don't know if they're real ballots or fake ballots unless you have all the other elements of the chain of custody. And then, of course, ballots lead to the final link in the chain of custody, which is the vote tally. And of course, that's where the machines fit in. That's what they're going in and taking those ballots and converting them into a tally of the votes. Every single aspect of that chain of custody should be visible to American citizens. I mean, if you want to be in the mode of saying that it was a secure election, you got to be able to put up or just shut up about it, because I'm tired of being told it was a secure election and then they provide no evidence in support of that. Somehow they flip the narrative so that the burden of proof is on folks like myself that are concerned with the integrity of the election, saying you haven't shown us any evidence. Well, bullpucky, the burden of proof is on you to demonstrate that a lawful election was conducted, and for that you need to show your papers.
And here is the other kind of the turnabout with that is you have to prove it, but you get in trouble for trying to prove it. You get criminalized for trying to prove it. Bringing it into a court, they say, we're not going to hear it. It feels like a hamster wheel. But I have hope. Like you said, there are other things going on. People are starting to understand more about how this all works. I really appreciate you talking about beyond the ballot, although that is so important, obviously, because it's the final vote count. But it's these things too. Can you talk a little bit, like, what do you think is the significance of precinct level voting and then the efforts by the Attorney General's office, General Dillon's office, to secure the districting lines according to the law? How impactful is that really going to be? Precinct voting and securing the actual district lines and not the gerrymandering lines.
Yeah, that's important from that SCOTUS decision in particular to try to get us some fair districts that aren't based on some of the gamesmanship that's been done in the past on it. And as state senator, I went through what was happening with establishment of some of these district lines before, and it's a lot goes into it. Let's just suffice it to say. And but I think the idea that we safeguard this lowest common denominator of the vote process called the precinct is safeguarding that and making it very important is where we need to kind of focus our attention. Because if you get that right at the precinct level, then you can roll it up to the municipal level, you can roll it up to the county level, you can roll it up to the state level, and you always have that core precinct level data to go to hold on to. But what we're seeing, unfortunately, is a trend towards centralization of more and more of the operation. So you have the idea of these AV counting boards, for example, for where large municipalities like the city of Detroit, they'll roll in and count all of their absentee ballots across all the different precincts in a centralized area. And so you start losing the traceability between the precinct and the actual vote tally. Matter of fact, the city of Detroit never presents a precinct specific vote tally. They wait until they get their information from Wayne County. The county level actually prints out the precinct level vote tallies in Wayne County and in other large counties, not just in Michigan, but across the country. That should send off alarm bells. And this whole concept of early voting has been implemented as a method of centralizing the casting of votes. So it's no longer a precinct specific activity. Now, in many states and many areas, it's actually a countywide because they can't get the staff necessary to cover it at the precinct level. So what we're seeing, unfortunately, is a trend to get away from those low-level precinct-based voting practices and centralize more and more of the operations. I mean, culminating, of course, in what the Help America Vote Act required, which was a centralized state voter registration database. So that's the trend line. It's a trend line towards centralization, and we need to spread it back out again, which is kind of the spirit of the Electoral College. You create a bunch of firewalls, except we want the firewalls at the precinct level, and that makes it very difficult for these folks to go off and steal elections, statewide elections, and national elections like that for president. So that's what we're bucking up against. But one thing I want to hit on real hard, though, Torona, is that, you know, I'm an engineer by training. That's the way I've been, and I always focus in on these X's and O's, like we're talking about with the chain of custody. But I'll tell you, having dug into this for the last almost 6 years now around election integrity, it's very clear that there are other factors at stake here that are extremely important that need to be addressed as well. And I think President Trump has done a great job of addressing that, because part of it is funding and these NGOs inserting themselves into manipulation of elections. NGOs actually conducting the elections without transparency because they're not subject to open record requests. We're seeing the influence of foreign actors, like the recent indictment of David Rivera, former congressman, who was on the payroll of Venezuela to go off and influence our elected officials. So we've got, and don't even start me on judicial malfeasance and the fact that they're tied to bribery and other areas. So President Trump, the one thing he did on day one is he started going after the purse strings across the board. And he cut off the funding of organizations like the Center for Internet Security with these E.I. Isaac centers, which are NGO effectively not doing a wiretap on the elections in all 50 states. He cut them off. He cut off the Global Engagement Center out of the State Department, which was going off and manipulating our elections. He went after the cartels, which are providing money into these funding streams as well. So here's the one ray of hope going into this upcoming election is that they got a lot less money to go off and play with now to go off and bribe people to do bad things in the upcoming election. And on that front, I'm very comfortable with what I'm seeing across the country. So
No one
anyway,
can
for
forget
whatever it's
that,
worth.
I think that's a really huge point you're making. I've kind of forgotten about that because the massive influx of money that came from Zuckerberg and Facebook to mount the drop boxes all over the country.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a Facebook initiative. Mark Zuckerberg paid for that. That didn't come from, I don't think anyway, in any way, from our federal dollars. He, took credit for that. And it was obviously a massive, it was a big vote. It was a vote scam. It was a
Yeah.
massive scam.
And he sealed the border too.
Yeah.
And he sealed the border. I mean, all these illegal aliens going off and casting votes. I mean, and he's shipping them out now. I mean, so there's some really good stuff on that front.
That is actually really, really excellent too. Now, do you think so we've been preparing everybody with Cause of America, Linda Offense Fund. We're our message is loud and strong. Be prepared to help your clerks be ready in case the Vote Act passes, the SAVE Act passes. There's been a lot of talk about how they're going to wait to pass it till the very last minute. So basically, it's rendered ineffective and because they love us so much. Our Senate loves us so much and wants to act in the best interest of the American people. But I say, like what you've done, be prepared, get ready to go. Make sure you're doing everything in your local community to get your clerk ready, because no matter how they try to villainize your proactiveness in securing your own elections, it's still legal. You actually can do that. Elections do belong to the people, and we need to have them ready. Do you see that being helpful? Do you see them actually passing the SAVE Act? What are you hearing?
I don't know. We need to be prepared for them not doing that. But I think that still leaves it open for President Trump to enforce executive orders pertaining to insurrection and other areas that give him emergency powers to go off and require hand count to paper ballots. So the preparation time.
Do you think that's a viable option?
Yes,
Do you
with
really?
some of the information that I'm pretty certain the president has. I mean, if I've got it, I'm sure he's got it, and some of his key advisors have it around the manipulation of our elections using things like electronic voting systems. I mean, the information out there is getting pretty damning. I mean, they're just simple things around what the coming out of Venezuela and the information coming out of those folks. And I have to think that Mr. Maduro is singing like a canary right now behind bars.
I have heard the same.
So there's a lot going on there. We saw the recent movement of indictments, and not just indictments, but convictions coming out of Southern Florida dealing with Venezuela. So there's good things happening there. But as far as our ability to respond in time for the elections, every single state has a disaster recovery plan that forces them to address the scenario that power has gone out and they can't go off and use things like electronic voting systems. They have to have these plans in place right now. This isn't something that they should have to go out and rewrite or scramble to go off and figure out how it's supposed to be done. No, this is supposed to be on the shelf. You may have to blow a few flakes of dust off of it because you haven't gone into it in a while. But these methods are out there. And so for them to say that they're not ready to go off and deploy this, it means that they're showing willful neglect of duty by not preparing these disaster recovery plans in the first place.
That is amazing guidance for everybody watching right now to be checking that app out. Patrick Kolbeck, thank you so much for joining us here on America's Mom. You run the Election Crime Bureau. Everybody can find you on X. Very detailed, very analytical analysis. If you are someone who really wants to understand what has gone on, what is going on, and what you can do to save your local elections and help save our country, go check out Patrick Kolbeck's X account. And of course, go to electioncrimebureau.com.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you
there's
so much for
a
being with us.
lot of information going up on that website as we speak. I mean, I've finally said, to heck with it. We're going to put out every piece of evidence they say doesn't exist, and it's going to be up there for everybody to review.
The judges don't want to see it, but the people need to see it. Thank you so much. And guys, we've got just 1 minute left. I wanted to end on a really, really high note. That is so great. Disaster recovery plan. Every clerk is supposed to have it across the country to make sure they can conduct an election, even if the electricity goes out, which means no machines. So go check that out locally. But last little piece before we go, I want you to know Common Sense is returning. The only LGBTQ judge in the state of Texas was just removed, forever disqualified from judicial service in the state of Texas. This is Bexar County Judge Rosie Speedlin Gonzalez, speeding in her way right out of the courtroom. This county's, it was the county's rather, first openly LGBT judge, has resigned and accepted a lifetime ban from the bench after serious misconduct complaints, most noticeably December 2024 incident where she had a defense attorney handcuffed mid-hearing. Apparently that is not allowed. The criminal charges were dropped in exchange for the permanent disqualification of Speedy Gonzalez there. I mean, Speedlin Gonzalez. So, Texas is sound, fighting forever, moving on. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We are going to be back here on Monday with some really just absolute experts. You're going to love our show on Monday. Please make sure you're here with us 1 p.m. Central Time. Can't wait to see you guys back here again. Remember, all that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men and women like you